Hi, welcome back. I'm Professor Corinne Bendersky from the UCLA Anderson School. Now we're going to talk about team effectiveness in terms of selecting the right people. When you figure out who you want to have on your team, rather than going to your friend and saying, hey, let's do this together, it helps to think very strategically about what is the purpose of the team, and then to identify the people you need to help you accomplish those goals. The first aspect of the team that you need to think about in order to identify the right people to select is what the task is. What is the purpose of this team? And when we talk about team tasks, we think about two different things. The first is the objectives. What is it that this team is being brought together to do? There are three big buckets of team objectives. The first one are tactical teams. These are teams that are implementing some vision. They're implementing some standard operating procedures, and they are experts who can coordinate their efforts together really efficiently and effectively. Think of an emergency response team, a group of firefighters, or a surgical team, or in the emergency room of a hospital. The second type of objectives are problem-solving teams. These are teams that are brought together to figure out what happened or what should we do next. This might be an after-action review team that's really got experts who can figure out how to do the right root cause analysis in order to fix the root of the problem, not the symptoms. The third type of team objective are creative. The purpose of creative teams are to identify really novel ideas or products or services that haven't been done before. The kinds of people you need to accomplish tactical, problem-solving, or creative task objectives are very different. And so you better know what it is that this team is going to be working on before you identify the people you need. The second aspect of tasks that are important to understand is the nature of the interdependency. That is, how are the people who are going to be brought together working together? How are we integrating their expertise? And again, there are three big buckets that we like to talk about. The first type of interdependency is pooled. Pooled interdependency is when you have each individual has their own expertise that they independently contribute to the collective task, at which point it is integrated together in order to accomplish the goal. A surgical team is a great example of a pooled interdependent task. You've got your anesthesiologists and your doctors and your nurses. Each one brings their own expertise to the task of performing surgery, and they have to do it, coordinate their efforts together in the surgical process. The second type of interdependence is sequential. This is a process not different from an assembly line, although the level of expertise can be quite sophisticated. The point of sequential interdependence is that tasks are handed off from one expert to the next. There is a dependence on the part of one expert on the previous expert's output. They can't do their work until they receive the work completed by the other person. So the coordination occurs at those handoff points. It's really important. The third type of interdependence is reciprocal interdependence. This is true interdependence in that there is no individual expertise that can be done in isolation from the other members of the team. You actually really need to work together throughout the entire process. Think about a theatrical group or an improvisational jazz ensemble. No individual member can produce the output or even a contribution to the output without working with all the other members. Understanding the objectives and the type of interdependence that you are bringing this team together to do will go a long way to helping identify what kind of people you need in terms of what their substantive and also process expertise is. Then you look to your people. And when we identify the kinds of people, the right people to bring onto the team, there are several different aspects that we want to consider. Again, many of us will look to our friends, the people that it is easiest for us to work with, the people we know and trust the best. But those individuals may not be optimal for your team. You want to think strategically about the composition of expertise, what we'll call the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs of the members. In the KSAs, you need to have both substantive task expertise and also process expertise that will facilitate the coordination that's necessary for the particular objective and type of task interdependence. Second big issue is the diversity of your team members. Remember that marginal cost and marginal benefit calculation you need to do? The more different the members of your team are, the more marginal benefit they bring in terms of their point of view, the information, the way that they process information, and the uniqueness of their contributions. If you have redundancy in your team members, then the costs of the processes that are incurred by having them involved are going to outweigh the benefits that they bring. The third big question is, how big should your team be? We know that teams that are larger than 10 people tend to be unwieldy. The process costs overwhelm any potential marginal benefit of having more than 10 people, at least in your core team. There may be political reasons why you have to have more people than 10 on your team, but maybe you want to have them in more peripheral roles rather than the core day-to-day operations. The last big question to understand, or the last big question to answer when you're bringing together the team and selecting the people is, are they co-located in the same place or distributed in different places? And this implies what kind of communication is going to occur. Is it going to be largely face-to-face or largely virtual? Are you going to be utilizing a lot of technologies? And what kind of relationships then can develop if the team is distributed and relying primarily on virtual communication rather than co-located and relying on face-to-face communication? Different kinds of skills, knowledge, and abilities, KSAs, are important depending on the answers to each of these questions. The KSAs that you want to think about and identify in your potential team members are complementary, non-redundant task and process expertise. Those are the primary KSAs that you're concerned about. Non-redundant, again, so that the marginal benefits outweigh the marginal costs, and both task expertise and process expertise so that you have people working on the task who are really good at coordinating or implementing the particular objectives and managing the interdependencies that are inherent in your objectives. Also want to think about what political and social networks the members of your team bring to the table. You want to be able to have members of your team extend your contact and reach broadly to as many different kinds of social networks and to as many different kinds of political support resources as possible. Again, if people are redundant, very similar to one another, you're going to have a relatively narrow network of influence and support for your team. So you want to think breadth. The last is, what kinds of resources does each member bring to the team in terms of personnel, financial, training, etc.? You want, again, diversity. Make sure that the people you are selecting are bringing complementary and supportive resources, not conflicting resources with them. The context in which your team is embedded is also going to influence how effective the team is, and one big way that happens is through the incentives, whether the organization is rewarding the members of the team for the group rather than for their individual performance. People work for incentives, and if their incentives are individual, then their actions and efforts are not going to be focused on helping the team effectively succeed at its collective goal. So group rewards are really important to help support and facilitate effective team member contributions. Okay, so in sum, you need to have a team when the task is interdependent and the output requires diverse inputs. It's very important that you strategically select individuals who have an appropriate mix of task and process expertise, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And the organization must provide appropriate resources and incentives for group effort. These things are especially important in an entrepreneurial environment where resources are often constrained and limited. It's essential that you think carefully about making sure that each person you bring onto the team adds marginal benefit above the marginal cost that is inherent to having them come. This may be really important with respect to identifying your core members, and you have to be careful and thoughtful about who's going to help you, especially at the initial stages of your new venture. Thank you. I'll see you in the next segment.